I was there in Ken that you're not on the red carpet, mind you, but close enough to feel the heat of the flashbulbs and the buzz in the air. There's a kind of electricity that runs through that seaside city when the film festival is in full swing. Paparazzi clamor like gulls over a dropped croissant, and everyone pretends they're just slightly unimpressed by the fact that they're 3 feet from a movie star, but when Brad Pitt stepped out of that glossy black Maybach, the crowd didn't pretend anything. Cameras snapped so fast it sounded like rainfall on tin. He wore a classic tuxedo, crisp white shirt, bow tie just slightly loosened that effortless charisma he's practically patented by now. People screamed his name like they'd known him their whole lives. Maybe, in some strange way, they felt like they had. Now, here's where things start to get strange, because just 20 minutes after Brad ascended those legendary red steps waving, posing, pausing with that familiar half-smile, a man appeared at the far end of the croisette. No entourage. No photographers rushing. Just a man in a nearly identical tuxedo, walking calmly through the crowd. And when people caught sight of him, everything slowed. That he didn't just look like Brad Pitt, that he looked exactly like him, same bone structure. Same hair. Same gait. Even the subtle scar near the temple, that barely visible mark Brad once got falling off a skateboard as a kid, was there. At first, people laughed. Thought it was a stunt double. A look-alike. Cannes is full of them during festival week, but I was watching closely. I saw the way this man turned toward a mirror in a hotel lobby window and paused. Just for a moment. Like he wasn't checking his reflection, but recognizing it. And when someone shouted, "Brad," he turned, not surprised. Not flattered. Almost expectant. Later that evening, I heard the story from someone who worked the VIP bar at the Hotel Martinez. Brad Pitt, the real Brad Pitt, was there, champagne in hand, chatting with directors, looking every bit the star. Until he walked in, the twin, same suit. Same posture. Same tired glint in the eye. Security froze. So did Brad. According to the bartender who has seen more than his fair share of celebrity meltdowns, the two locked eyes. Not with amusement. Not with curiosity, with something closer to dread. The twin didn't yell. He didn't demand attention. He simply walked up to Brad and said one sentence, quiet, calm, like he'd been rehearsing it for years: "We were separated at birth." Brad laughed. Nervously. Brushed it off like a joke. He said something about great genes and moved toward the exit. But he looked shaken. Not confused, shaken. That night, no photos of the doppelganger made it into the tabloids. No headlines. Just a whisper passed between assistants, publicists, bodyguards. A whisper that, by morning, had turned into a question: who was that man, and why did Brad Pitt, a man whose life is broadcast to millions, suddenly act like he'd seen a ghost? I didn't know then what I know now. About the scars. About the voice. About the files that would soon be leaked, but that was the moment it started. Not with a scandal. Not with a scream, just a tuxedo, and a sentence that you'd think a moment like that, a stranger claiming to be your long-lost twin at the most public film festival in the world, would cause a storm. But for a while, nothing happened. Brad said nothing. His team said nothing. The tabloids didn't know what they were sitting on, but I kept digging. You see, I'm not just a storyteller. I used to be a journalist. Not the glamorous kind with a front-row seat at premieres. The type who spent years chasing ghost stories, trying to find truth in the footnotes. And this? This felt like one of those. 3 days after that bizarre encounter, Brad left Cannes early. Officially, it was scheduling conflicts. Unofficially, someone I trusted in his security detail said he was spooked. Said he'd asked for full digital sweeps of his hotel room. Said he kept checking the mirror not to fix his hair, but like he wasn't sure who was looking back. The stranger, meanwhile, didn't vanish. That he started showing up, first at the Carlton lobby bar, where a few agents swore they saw Brad Pitt ordering whiskey on the rocks and tipping with quiet precision. Then again, on the beach outside the Majestic, where tourists lined up for selfies. Half of them thought they were meeting the Brad Pitt. The other half didn't care. The resemblance was that uncanny. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Photos surfaced online grainy, shaky, clearly shot on phones. At first glance, they looked like any other candid of Brad on vacation. But there were problems. The timestamp didn't match his schedule. The clothes were wrong. The location was impossible, and then came the voice. Someone posted a video just 10 seconds of the twin buying espresso from a street vendor near Rue Diatybe. He says, "Merci, mon frère," in a voice so close to Brad's, I had to play it 5 times to convince myself it wasn't deepfake audio, but it wasn't that I spoke to the vendor, a wiry Algerian man named Idris who's worked that same cart for 22 years. He said the guy was polite. Smiled. Even made a joke about growing up in dusty hallways with locks on every door. Idris asked if he was Brad Pitt. The man's reply, "No, I'm the one they didn't pick." By now, Brad's team was scrambling. They shut down interviews. Cancelled an appearance on a German talk show. His assistant posted a vague story about needing quiet time. But the damage, subtle as it was, had already begun. Then came the moment that changed everything. That it happened in LA, not long after Cannes. Brad was scheduled to appear at a fundraiser in Bel Air. Glamorous venue. Black tie crowd. Everything precisely managed. And then, he walked in, not Brad, the other one. No one stopped him. Why would they? He looked the part. Walked the part. Even spoke the part. That he greeted the host, an aging studio executive with too much Botox and not enough awareness, with a warm hug and whispered something in her ear. She laughed. He mingled for 2 hours. Signed autographs. Took pictures. Gave a short speech about growing up in America's forgotten corners. The crowd loved him. It wasn't until the real Brad's car pulled up outside 10 minutes late due to traffic that anyone noticed something was off. Security froze. The host froze. For one surreal moment, both men were in the same building. 2 Brad Pitts. One in the foyer. One by the dessert table, and then, the twin vanished, slipped out a back door. Disappeared into the night like he'd never been there. The photos? Blurry. The CCTV footage? Corrupted, according to the venue's tech team, but one video made it online, posted by an intern who didn't know what she was holding. It showed the twin saying goodbye to a group of guests. Laughing. Waving, and as he turned to leave, someone, an older woman, elegant, mid-60s, touched his arm, and said, "Brad, darling, I didn't know you still wore your hair that way. Just like when you were little." That woman was Jane Pitt. Brad's mother. I don't know how to explain the look on her face when she saw the real Brad walk in moments later. But it wasn't just shock. It was something colder, confusion. Doubt. As if, for one terrifying second, she wasn't sure which one was hers. The fallout came fast. Studios began to pull back. Not publicly. They used phrases like creative delays and rescheduling due to market shifts. But behind the scenes, contracts were being re-evaluated. Directors were uneasy. Marketing departments weren't sure how to handle it. Because now, whenever Brad showed up anywhere, people whispered, "Is that him? Or the other one?" Then came the hacks. Brad's Instagram was wiped clean. His bio changed to one of 2. The truth lives in the mirror. No one claimed responsibility. His Twitter, same story. His official website redirected to a blank page with a single phrase, "How do you prove you're real when your face is everywhere?" The studio tried to spin it. Called it a phishing attempt. Hired cybersecurity experts. But nothing worked. Brad Pitt, one of the most recognizable faces in the world, was losing control of his identity, and quietly, the whispers started to shift, from, "Who is this guy?" to, "What if he's telling the truth? What if they were twins? What if there was a cover-up? What if Brad Pitt's childhood, the one we've all heard about in interviews, read about in glossy profiles, wasn't entirely real?" Because here's the detail no one talks about. Brad doesn't remember much before age 6. Not really. Not specifics. Just flashes. A room with yellow walls. A nurse named Doreen. A song with no lyrics and scars. Tiny ones. Along the ribs. Behind the ear. Inside the elbow, scars the twin also had that I didn't believe it either, not at first. But then someone showed me a photo. An old Polaroid, edges curled, colors faded. Two boys. Same face. Same eyes. Standing in front of a low concrete building with numbers stenciled on the door, St. Home for Boys. A facility that officially burned down in 1981. But if you dig deep enough past the official records, past the ashes, you'll find whispers. Of illegal experiments. Of state-funded studies. Of children separated, moved, renamed. Of identities erased. So maybe that man who approached Brad and Ken wasn't crazy, maybe he wasn't an impostor, maybe he wasn't pretending to be Brad Pitt, maybe he was reminding Brad Pitt that he isn't who he thinks he is. For nearly 3 weeks, Brad went silent. No public sightings, no press appearances, no Instagram stories from hotel rooftops or cryptic photos of espresso cups. The man who once lived under a microscope had vanished into the shadows of his own life. But behind the scenes, he was unraveling. I knew because a former assistant of his, someone who'd seen more than she was paid to see, reached out to me. She didn't want money. She wanted to talk. And what she said matched everything I feared, that he'd become obsessed. Not with the lookalike, but with the possibility that the lookalike was telling the truth. Brad had started revisiting his childhood records. Asked for sealed documents from the Missouri Department of Social Services. Spent hours on the phone with his mother, asking about details she hadn't thought about in decades. And when the answers didn't add up, when she hesitated, stumbled, said things like, "You were always sensitive," or "You had trouble adjusting," he began to wonder whether those memories were his at all. Or someone else's. It all came to a head one night in Joshua Tree. Brad owned a small property there, a place he rarely visited but kept as an escape from the world. No Wi-Fi, no security cameras, just desert silence. That's where the stranger came. Not by force. Not uninvited. Brad had sent the message. A burner phone. One line of text, "I'm ready." According to what I later pieced together, they met outside the cabin just after midnight. No one else was there. No handlers, no press. Just the two of them, standing under a wide western sky, both wearing flannel shirts like a frame from a movie neither of them remembered filming. They didn't speak at first. Just stared. For minutes. Brad was the one who broke the silence. "If you're lying, this is cruel." The other man didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "I'm here to remind you." That's when Brad demanded proof. Not photos. Not documents. Something deeper. And that's what he got. The man recited details. A lullaby sung off-key by a woman named Marla. The smell of lemon disinfectant in the hallway. A game they played with buttons and string, only 2 children would know it. A day one of them fell and cracked his head open on a radiator. Brad touched the faint scar near his scalp as he listened. He didn't speak. He didn't deny. He just stood there, like someone watching himself disappear. But then came the story, the one that explained everything and nothing at once. According to the twin, their birth wasn't ordinary. They'd been born in a private hospital outside Tulsa, Oklahoma. No birth certificates ever filed. Taken days later to a facility disguised as a children's home. St. Winston's. Not an orphanage. A program. Privately funded. Government adjacent. Focused on developmental variants under environmental control. That's what the documents called it. In simpler terms, testing nature versus nurture by dividing genetically identical children, manipulating their lives, and watching who became what. The boys had been separated at age 4. One sent to a family in Springfield, Missouri. The other, well, he wasn't so lucky. Passed through foster homes. Group centers. One of them became Brad Pitt. The other became nobody. Brad didn't believe it. Or rather, he didn't want to. But somewhere inside, a part of him already knew. "Why now?" he asked. The twin shrugged. "Because you're finally listening. And because they're trying to erase me again." That's when things turned darker. The twin claimed he'd been warned. Tracked. His phone tampered with. Emails vanished. He'd gone public in Cannes because it was the only place he knew Brad would have to see him and the only place he'd be protected by the spotlight. But now the spotlight had moved on, and shadows were closing in. "They don't care if I'm right," he said. "They only care that I exist." Brad offered him money. A private investigator. A lawyer. Anything. The twin refused. "I don't want your help," he said. "I want my name back." They sat together until dawn. Two men with the same face and 1,000 different wounds. And when Brad finally stood, he asked the question he'd been avoiding all night. "How do I prove it?" The twin looked at him. "You don't," he said. "You live with it." After that night, things began to unravel faster. A video surfaced, one that wasn't supposed to exist. Security footage from a private awards gala, weeks earlier. It showed two Brads. One on stage, shaking hands with donors. The other at the bar, drinking quietly. People noticed. Paused. Rewound. Played it again. The image was too clear to fake, too casual to stage. Soon, the media took notice. Headlines danced between disbelief and sensation. Brad Pitt doppelganger mystery deepens. Twin conspiracy or psychological breakdown? Experts were called in. Body language analysts. Deepfake specialists. Even childhood psychologists. Everyone had a theory. No one had answers. Then, just as quickly, the narrative turned. Studios released statements. Lawyers filed cease and desists against blogs. Interviews were cancelled. Journalists were pressured to stop asking questions. And for the first time in decades, Brad Pitt was treated like a liability that he tried to fight back. Posted a video, his own voice, trembling, saying, "I am who I've always been." But the damage was done. Comments flooded in. "Which one are you? Blink twice if you're the real one." Even his closest friends began to pull back. Not because they believed the twin. But because they didn't know what to believe. His mother wouldn't speak to the press. But a source close to her said she'd requested a private DNA test. And when the results came back, she cried, not because of what they said, but because she didn't know what she wanted them to say. And Brad? He was alone. For the first time in his life, not emotionally, not metaphorically, but absolutely, existentially alone. Because it's one thing to lose your reputation. It's another to lose the story you've told yourself your whole life, that he wasn't sure who he was anymore, but worse than that, he wasn't sure if he ever had been. Brad left Los Angeles in the middle of the night. No press release. No airport spotting. Just gone. His team said he was taking a long overdue break from public life, but those of us who had followed the story closely knew better. He wasn't retreating. He was chasing something. Or someone. A week later, he was in Prague, not filming. Not sightseeing. Digging. And the deeper he dug, the colder the trail became. Any official record of St. Winston's had been erased. The building had burned down in 1981, but the fire report was missing. Page 2. The organization that ran it? Defunct. The founding board? Dead, disappeared, or disavowed. No survivors. No testimonies. Except one. The twin. He disappeared, too. No trace since Joshua Tree. The phone he used? Burner. The car? Rented under a false name. It was like he never existed. Or someone made sure he didn't. Brad, meanwhile, became consumed. Not with the conspiracy, but with the silence around it. And that silence, he realized, was more dangerous than the twin ever was. The world wasn't asking who the other man was anymore. They were asking if Brad himself had lost his grip. They whispered behind closed doors, maybe he cracked. Maybe it was stress. Maybe the man we thought we knew was never really there. What do you do when your reflection starts answering for you? By then, the roles had reversed. Brad became the one people avoided. His name was scrubbed from 2 major upcoming projects. Sponsorship deals quietly evaporated. His friends, the ones who used to defend him with quotes in magazines, stopped calling. Not out of cruelty. Out of fear. No one wanted to be dragged into whatever this was. Because now it wasn't about a look-alike. It was about identity collapse. That's when Brad made the decision that he didn't tell anyone. Not even his closest confidants. But late one evening, he returned to the ruins of St. Winston's. It had taken months of negotiating with local authorities to get access. What was left was barely standing cracked cement, rusted hinges, weeds reclaiming what used to be corridors that he walked alone through what had once been a hallway. Found the scorched remains of a tiled floor. The smell of mildew hung in the air, mixed with ash and thyme. But in one room deep in the back he found it. A nameplate, blackened by fire, but still legible under the soot. Ward C, male, ages 3 to 5. And next to it, scratched into the wall with something sharp and desperate, were 2 letters. BP. He ran his fingers over them. Not like a celebrity. Not like a man in a mystery. Like a boy, touching proof that he had once been here. That someone, maybe him, maybe the other, had carved those letters into the wall. Maybe both. Maybe neither. That night, he recorded a video. Not for social media. Not for a documentary. Just a message. A private log. I don't know who I am anymore, he said. But maybe none of us do. Maybe we're all just stories someone else wrote. He looked into the camera. And for a moment, you couldn't tell if he was acting, or breaking. Then came the final blow. A letter, delivered not to Brad, but to a former journalist, a man who had been researching the St. Winston story in secret. The return address? Blank. The contents? A birth certificate. 2 names. One scratched out, and one circled in red ink. Benjamin Parker Pitt. No official record of such a name exists. But the handwriting matched an old nurse's logbook found in the rubble. The journalist sent it to Brad's team. They buried it. Too dangerous. Too vague. Too real. Brad saw it anyway. Held it in his hands. Stared at the circled name for an hour, and then, he stopped searching. No more press. No more lawyers. No more questions. He reappeared 6 months later at a charity event in New York. Looked healthy. Calm. Almost peaceful. When asked about the Ken incident, he smiled and said, "Sometimes we meet parts of ourselves we didn't know existed." That was it. No confirmation. No denial. The world moved on. Hollywood needed its golden boy back, and it welcomed him with open arms, cautiously, but willingly. New deals. New movies. A comeback arc. Everything right where it used to be, except one thing. Every so often, at public events, someone would spot him across the street, behind a pillar, in the corner of a wide crowd. A man in a dark coat. Watching, not stalking, not threatening, just, there, same face, same eyes, different life, and Brad would pause. Just for a moment. His smile would dim. His jaw would shift. Then he'd turn back to the cameras. The flashbulbs. The part he was meant to play, because even now, after everything, the truth isn't clear. Were they brothers, or was Brad split in 2? Is the twin real, or is he the part Brad lost? The pain, the questions, the pieces too jagged to carry into the spotlight. We don't know. Maybe we're not supposed to, but every mirror Brad passes still catches his glance, and somewhere, that man with his face, the one who calls himself the one they didn't choose, is still waiting, not for fame. Not for revenge, for recognition, because the worst kind of ghost isn't the one that haunts you. It's the one that wears your skin, and asks you who you are.